David never thought his Thursday evening would change everything. He was just doing what he always did, helping kids who needed someone to believe in them. The community center felt quiet that October night. Most of the volunteers had gone home and David was finishing up his paperwork. He'd been working there for 3 years now, and he genuinely loved what he did. Something about helping teenagers reminded him of his own tough times growing up. There was this one girl, Maya, who'd been coming to see him for months. When she first walked into his office, she had her arms crossed and anger written all over her face. Her mom had signed her up for counseling after she got suspended from school for fighting. Maya didn't want to be there, and she made that very clear. "This is stupid," she'd said during their first meeting. "You don't know anything about my life." And she was right. David didn't know her story yet, but he'd learned something important. Over the years, sometimes the angriest kids are just the most hurt ones. Maya's parents had gotten divorced 2 years earlier, and it wasn't pretty. Her dad had moved across the country with his new girlfriend, barely keeping in touch. Her mom was working all the time just to pay the bills. Maya felt like everyone had abandoned her, so she decided to push people away before they could leave. Week after week, David tried different approaches. Sometimes Maya would sit in complete silence for the entire hour. Other times she'd argue about everything he said. There were days when she wouldn't show up at all, and David would worry about where she was and if she was safe. But David didn't give up. He'd been that angry teenager once too. When he was 16, his own father had walked out on their family. David remembered feeling like the world was against him, like nothing mattered anymore. It took years for him to realize that his anger was really just pain in disguise. The breakthrough with Maya came on a rainy afternoon in September. She'd had a particularly bad week, failed a test, got into another argument with her mom, and her dad had forgotten her birthday completely. She walked into David's office and just broke down crying. "Why doesn't he care about me?" she sobbed. "What's wrong with me that my own father doesn't want to be around?" David felt his heart break for this kid. He made a decision that day to share something he rarely talked about. "There's nothing wrong with you, Maya," he said gently. "My dad left when I was about your age too, and for the longest time I thought it was my fault. I thought maybe if I'd been a better son or smarter or more athletic he would have stayed." Maya looked up at him with surprised eyes. Nobody had ever told her that an adult had gone through the same thing. "But here's what I learned," David continued. "When parents leave, it's about their own problems, not about us. Your dad leaving doesn't say anything about who you are as a person. It says something about him." That conversation was the turning point. Maya started opening up about her feelings instead of acting out. She began coming to their sessions regularly, and slowly but surely, things started improving. Her grades went from D's to C's, then to B's. She stopped getting into fights at school. Most importantly, she started talking to her mom again instead of shutting her out. David was proud of Maya's progress, but he knew the real work had come from her. All he'd done was listen and believe in her when she couldn't believe in herself. This particular Thursday evening, David was feeling good about Maya's latest report from school. She'd made honor roll for the first time in 2 years. He was packing up his things when he heard footsteps in the hallway. "Excuse me, are you David? Chen?" He looked up to see a woman standing in his doorway. She was soaked from the rain outside, but she had kind eyes that seemed familiar somehow. She looked nervous but determined. "Yes, that's me. Can I help you?" "I'm Elena Rodriguez," she said, stepping into the office. "Maya's mom." David's eyes widened. He'd heard so much about Elena over the months, but they'd never actually met. Maya usually took the bus to her appointments, and when Elena did drop her off, she stayed in the car. "Oh, it's so nice to finally meet you," David said, standing up quickly. "Please come in. Is everything okay with Maya?" Elena smiled, and David could see where Maya got her beautiful smile from. "Everything's wonderful with Maya. That's actually why I'm here." She took a deep breath like she was gathering courage. "I wanted to thank you," she said. "I don't think you understand what you've done for our family. 6 months ago, I was losing my daughter. She was angry all the time, failing school, getting into trouble. I was working 2 jobs and going to school myself, and I felt like I was failing as a mother. David could hear the emotion in her voice. Maya talks about you all the time now. Elena continued. She tells me about the things you discuss, the advice you give her. She's like a different person. She's my daughter again. David felt touched, but also a little embarrassed by the praise. Maya did all the hard work herself. I just listened. No, Elena said firmly. You did so much more than that. You gave her hope. You showed her that there are adults who will stick around and not give up on her. You have no idea how much that means to a kid who's been abandoned by her father. The rain was still coming down hard outside, and Elena glanced toward the window. This might sound crazy, she said, but would you like to get some coffee? There's a diner down the street that stays open late. I feel like I owe you a proper thank you, and I'd love to tell you more about how much Maya has changed. David looked at his watch. It was almost 8 o'clock and he didn't have any other plans. Something about Elena's sincerity and warmth made him curious to know more about the woman who'd raised such a strong, resilient daughter. I'd like that, he said. Let me just grab my jacket. As they walked through the parking lot in the rain, David had no idea that this simple coffee invitation would change his life completely. Sometimes the most important moments start with the smallest decisions. The diner was one of those classic American places with red booths and checkered floors. Elena and David found a quiet corner table away from the few other customers. Elena ordered black coffee while David went for hot chocolate. He'd never been much of a coffee drinker. As they settled in, David couldn't help but notice how tired Elena looked. Not just physically tired, but emotionally worn down in a way that spoke of years of carrying heavy burdens alone. I have to be honest, Elena said, wrapping her hands around her coffee cup for warmth. I've been wanting to meet you for months, but I was scared. Scared? David asked, surprised. Why? Elena looked down at her coffee. Because I was afraid you'd see what a mess I've made of everything. Maya's problem started after the divorce, and I blame myself for not handling things better. David leaned forward. Elena, from everything Maya has told me, you're an amazing mother. She talks about how hard you work, how you're always there for her even when you're exhausted. I work at a dental office during the day, Elena explained. Then I clean office buildings at night, and 3 nights a week I'm in nursing school classes. Maya used to complain that she never saw me anymore. David was impressed. You're going to nursing school while working 2 jobs and raising a teenager? That's incredible. Elena shook her head. It didn't feel incredible when Maya was failing classes and getting suspended. I felt like I was failing at the most important job I'd ever had, being her mom. What changed? David asked, though he had a feeling he knew the answer. You happened, Elena said simply. About 2 months after Maya started seeing you, she came home from school with a completely different attitude. Instead of slamming her bedroom door, she actually sat at the kitchen table and started her homework without me asking. Elena's eyes lit up as she remembered. I was so shocked, I just stood there watching her. When I asked what was different, she said her counselor had helped her understand that her anger wasn't helping anyone, especially herself. David smiled. Maya's really smart. Once she decided to channel that energy into something positive, there was no stopping her. But it wasn't just her grades, Elena continued. She started talking to me again, really talking. She told me about her day at school, about her friends, about her worries. We'd lost that connection completely after the divorce. David could hear the emotion in Elena's voice. It was clear that getting her daughter back meant everything to her. She told me about the day she cried in your office, Elena said quietly, about how you shared your own story with her. That meant more to her than you'll ever know. I probably shouldn't have done that, David admitted. It's not really professional to share personal details. Maybe not, Elena said, but it's what Maya needed to hear. She needed to know that someone she respected had gone through the same thing and come out okay. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, both lost in their thoughts. Can I ask you something? Elena said. What made you want to work with teenagers? It can't be easy dealing with kids who don't want to be there. David stirred his hot chocolate thoughtfully. When I was Maya's age, I didn't have anyone to talk to. My mom was working 3 jobs after my dad left, and I didn't want to burden her with my problems. I got into some trouble because I didn't know how to handle my anger. What kind of trouble? Elena asked gently. Nothing too serious, David said. Skipping school, getting into fights, hanging out with kids who weren't good influences. I was headed down a bad path until my high school guidance counselor took an interest in me. Elena nodded, understanding. His name was Mr. Peterson, David continued. He didn't just give me detention when I screwed up. He actually talked to me like I mattered. He helped me realize that I had choices, even when everything felt out of control. So you decided to do the same thing for other kids, Elena said. Exactly. I figured if one person believing in me could change my whole life direction, maybe I could do that for someone else. Elena was quiet for a long moment, studying David's face. Maya's lucky to have found you. We both are. There was something in the way she said it that made David's heart skip a beat. He'd been so focused on helping Maya that he hadn't really thought about Elena as anything other than a concerned parent. You know, Elena said, changing the subject. Maya told me you like to cook. She said you mentioned making homemade pasta once. David laughed. It's just a hobby. I find cooking relaxing after dealing with teenagers all day. I love cooking too, Elena said, her face brightening. Though lately I barely have time to make anything more complicated than sandwiches. I miss making real meals. What's your specialty? David asked. My grandmother taught me to make these amazing tamales. It takes hours, but there's something therapeutic about the whole process. Maya used to help me when she was little. That sounds wonderful. I'd love to try making tamales sometime. Elena smiled. Maybe I could teach you, as a way of saying thank you for everything you've done. David felt that same flutter in his chest again. I'd really like that. They ended up talking for almost 3 hours. Elena told him about her dreams of becoming a registered nurse, about how she wanted to work in pediatrics because she loved helping children. David shared stories about some of his success cases, careful not to mention names or violate confidentiality. As the diner started to empty out, Elena glanced at her watch. Oh my goodness, it's almost 11. I have to work in the morning. I should let you get home, David said, though he didn't really want the evening to end. As they walked to their cars, Elena turned to him. Thank you for tonight. I haven't had a conversation like that in years. Me neither, David admitted. I really enjoyed talking with you. Elena hesitated for a moment, like she wanted to say something else. Instead, she simply said, I hope we can do this again sometime. I'd like that very much, David replied. As he drove home that night, David couldn't stop thinking about Elena's smile, her determination, her obvious love for her daughter. He'd gone into that diner thinking he was just accepting a grateful parent's thanks. He was leaving with something he hadn't expected, the beginning of feelings for a woman who was quickly becoming much more than just Maya's mother. 3 weeks had passed since that night at the diner, and David found himself looking forward to Thursdays more than usual. Not because of his regular sessions with Maya, though those were going better than ever, but because Elena had started stopping by the community center occasionally. It started innocently enough, the first time she brought a container of homemade soup for the volunteers. You all work so hard, she'd said. I thought you might appreciate a warm meal. The soup was incredible, and David couldn't help but compliment her cooking skills. The second time she brought fresh baked bread. The third time it was cookies that disappeared within minutes of her arrival. Soon other volunteers started joking that Thursday had become their favorite day of the week. But David noticed that Elena always seemed to linger a little longer when talking to him. Their conversations would start about Maya's progress and somehow drift to other topics, books they'd both read, places they wanted to travel, childhood memories that made them laugh. Maya noticed the change in her mother too. Mom's been humming while she cooks, she mentioned during one of their sessions. She hasn't done that since before the divorce. I think she likes you. David felt his cheeks get warm. Maya, your mom is just being friendly. She's grateful for the help you've received here. Uh-huh, Maya said with a knowing smile. And I Suppose it's just coincidence that she always asks what time your sessions end so she can show up with food? David tried to keep his expression neutral, but inside his heart was racing. Could Elena really be interested in him? And more importantly, what would that mean for his professional relationship with Maya? That weekend, David decided to talk to his supervisor, Dr. Patricia Williams. She was an older woman who'd been running youth programs for over 20 years, and David respected her judgment completely. "I need to ask you something," David said, settling into the chair across from her desk. "It's about professional boundaries." Dr. Williams raised an eyebrow. "This should be interesting. What's going on?" David explained the situation, how he'd helped Maya, how Elena had thanked him, how they'd been spending more time together. He was careful not to reveal any confidential information about Maya's case, but he wanted guidance on the ethics of the situation. "Are you asking if it's okay to have feelings for a client's parent?" Dr. Williams asked directly. David nodded, feeling somewhat embarrassed. "Well," she said, leaning back in her chair, "your professional relationship is with Maya, not with her mother. As long as any personal relationship with Elena doesn't interfere with your ability to help Maya, I don't see a problem." "But what if things go wrong?" David asked. "What if we date and it doesn't work out? Would that affect Maya's treatment?" Dr. Williams was quiet for a moment. "That's a valid concern. But David, you can't live your whole life avoiding connections because of what might go wrong. The question is, do you think you're mature enough to handle this professionally if things don't work out romantically?" David thought about it. "I think so. Maya has made so much progress that she probably won't need counseling much longer anyway. She's got the tools she needs now. Then maybe the real question is whether you're ready to take a chance on happiness," Dr. Williams said with a smile. Meanwhile, Elena was dealing with her own complicated feelings. She hadn't dated anyone since her divorce 2 years ago. She'd been so focused on Maya and her own career goals that she'd convinced herself she didn't have time for romance. But something about David was different. He wasn't just kind to her. He was genuinely kind to her daughter, which meant everything to Elena. She'd watched him interact with Maya, seen how patient and caring he was. Any man could be charming on a date, but David had shown his character through his work. Still, Elena was scared. Her ex-husband had seemed wonderful in the beginning, too. He'd been charming and attentive until Maya was born, and then everything changed. He became distant, critical, and eventually unfaithful. Elena had promised herself she'd never put Maya through that kind of instability again. But Maya seemed to genuinely like David. More than that, she respected him. Elena had never seen her daughter respond to any adult the way she responded to David. "Mom," Maya said one evening as they were doing dishes together, "can I ask you something?" "Of course, sweetheart." "Do you like David? I mean, like him? Elena nearly dropped the plate she was washing. "Why would you ask that?" "Because you get all smiley when you talk about him, and you've been making enough food to feed an army just so you have an excuse to visit him." Elena sighed. There was no point in lying to her daughter. "I might like him a little bit." "Good," Maya said firmly. "Because he likes you too. Trust me, I can tell. Maya, it's complicated. David is your counselor. What if dating him somehow messed up the good thing you two have going?" Maya was quiet for a moment, and Elena could see her thinking seriously about the question. "Mom, can I tell you something? David already told me that even if something happened between you two, it wouldn't change how he feels about helping me. He said caring about people doesn't get smaller when you care about more people, it gets bigger." Elena felt her heart skip. "He said that?" "Yeah. And Mom, I've never seen you happy like this. Even before Dad left, you weren't this happy. You deserve someone who makes you smile." That night, Elena lay in bed thinking about everything Maya had said. Her daughter was right. She hadn't been truly happy in years. She'd been surviving, working hard, doing what needed to be done. But she hadn't been living. The next Thursday, Elena arrived at the community center earlier than usual. She'd made lasagna this time, and she was carrying it carefully when she bumped into David in the parking lot. "Perfect timing," he said, rushing to help her with the heavy dish. "I was just thinking about lunch." Actually, Elena said, taking a deep breath, I was hoping we could talk. Privately, I mean. David's expression became more serious. Of course. Is everything okay with Maya? Maya's fine. Better than fine, actually. It's about, well, it's about us. David felt his pulse quicken. Us? Elena nodded. I know this might be awkward, and I know the timing isn't perfect, but I need to be honest with you about something. They found a quiet spot in the community center's small garden area. Elena set down the lasagna and turned to face David directly. I haven't felt this way about anyone in a very long time, she said. Maybe ever. And I know it's complicated because of Maya, but I can't keep pretending that what I feel for you is just gratitude. David stared at her, hardly believing what he was hearing. Elena, please let me finish, she said. I've spent the last 2 years being careful about everything. Careful with my heart, careful with Maya's feelings, careful not to make any mistakes. But being careful hasn't made me happy. It's just made me safe. She paused, looking directly into his eyes. I don't want to be just safe anymore, David. I want to take a chance on something real, on someone who I know has a good heart because I've seen how he treats the most important person in my world. David felt like his heart might burst. Elena, I've been hoping you'd say something like that, but I was afraid to push because I didn't want to make things awkward for Maya. Maya actually gave me permission to tell you how I feel, Elena said with a small laugh. She said I deserve to be happy. David reached out and gently took Elena's hands. She's right. You do deserve to be happy. And if you'll let me, I'd like to try to make you happy. Elena smiled, and David thought it was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. So what happens now? She asked. Now we take it slow, David said. We figure it out together, and we make sure Maya knows she's still the priority. I can live with that, Elena said, as long as we're figuring it out together. 2 months had passed since Elena and David had their heart-to-heart conversation in the community center garden. They'd been taking things slow, just like David had suggested. Their relationship had grown naturally, coffee dates after Maya's, sessions, long phone conversations after Elena finished her night classes, and weekend dinners where Maya would join them. Everything seemed perfect, but Maya was starting to act differently. David noticed it first during their regular Thursday session. She seemed distracted, almost nervous, and she kept asking strange questions. David, what happens when I graduate high school next year? Maya asked, fidgeting with her backpack straps. Well, you'll probably go to college. You've got great grades. Now, so you'll have lots of options. But I mean, what happens with this? She gestured around his office. With our sessions? David studied her face carefully. Maya, you've made incredible progress. Honestly, you probably don't need regular counseling much longer. You've got all the tools you need to handle whatever comes your way. Instead of looking happy about this news, Maya looked worried. So you're saying you won't be my counselor anymore? Not necessarily. If you needed support in the future, I'd always be here. But Maya, you're not that angry, confused kid who walked in here a year ago. You're confident, you're doing well in school, and you have a great relationship with your mom. Maya was quiet for a long moment. Then she asked the question that had been bothering her for weeks. What if things don't work out between you and my mom? What if you guys break up? Would you still be there for me, or would you disappear like my dad did? David's heart sank. He should have seen this coming. Maya's father had abandoned her, and now she was terrified that any important man in her life might do the same thing. Maya, look at me, David said gently. I need you to hear this, okay? No matter what happens between your mom and me romantically, you will always matter to me. Always. But how can you promise that? Maya's voice was getting emotional. My dad used to say he'd always be there too. David leaned forward in his chair. Because I'm not your father, Maya. I chose to care about you long before I had feelings for your mom. That care doesn't disappear just because other things might change. But what if seeing me reminds you of her? What if it's too awkward? Maya, do you remember what I told you about caring for people? David asked. I said that love doesn't get smaller when you love more people. It gets bigger, My caring about you doesn't depend on my relationship with anyone else. Maya wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I'm scared, David. I've never had a father figure before. Not really. And I like having you in my life. I like having family dinners and someone who actually cares about my grades and asks about my day. David felt his throat tighten with emotion. You'll always have that, Maya, I promise you. Can I tell you something embarrassing? Maya asked quietly. Of course. Sometimes I pretend you're my dad. Not in a weird way, just... I imagine what it would be like to have a dad who actually shows up, who comes to my school events and helps me with college applications and walks me down the aisle someday. David had to blink back tears. Maya, that's not embarrassing at all, and you know what? I'd be honored to do all those things, whether I'm dating your mom or not. Really? Really? You're stuck with me now, kid. I'm not going anywhere. Maya smiled for the first time all session. Good, because I was starting to think I might have to sabotage your relationship to keep you around. David laughed. Well, I'm glad we cleared that up before you started plotting. That evening, David called Elena to tell her about his conversation with Maya. Elena wasn't surprised. She'd noticed Maya acting strange too. I think she's been testing both of us, Elena said. Last week she asked me what would happen if you decided you didn't want to be with someone who has a teenage daughter. She wanted to know if I'd choose you or her. What did you tell her? I told her that wasn't a choice I'd ever have to make because any man worth being with would understand that she comes first in my life. David smiled. You're an amazing mother, Elena. Sometimes I wonder if I'm doing the right thing, though, Elena admitted. Maybe it's selfish of me to pursue this relationship when Maya's still healing from her father's abandonment. Elena, Maya needs to see that healthy relationships exist. She needs to see that not all men leave, and that love can be stable and consistent. I hope so. I just want to do right by her. 3 weeks later, something unexpected happened that changed everything. Elena had been having a particularly good week. She'd aced her nursing school finals, got great feedback at work, and Maya had been accepted to her first-choice college with a partial scholarship. That Friday evening, Elena was cooking dinner when Maya came into the kitchen with a serious expression on her face. Mom, can we talk? Elena turned down the heat on the stove. Sure, honey. What's on your mind? I owe you an apology, Maya said. I've been acting weird lately because I was scared about you and David, but I realize now that I was being selfish. Elena sat down at the kitchen table and patted the chair next to her. You weren't being selfish, sweetheart. You were protecting yourself. But I was also protecting myself from something good, Maya said, sitting down. Mom, I see how happy you are with David. I see how he makes you laugh and how you actually relax when he's around. I haven't seen you that happy since, well, maybe ever. Elena felt tears starting to form in her eyes. And David makes me happy too, Maya continued. He's patient with me. He believes in me. And he actually listens when I talk. He's nothing like Dad. Maya, you don't have to... Let me finish, Mom. I've been thinking about this a lot. David told me that love gets bigger when you share it with more people. I think he's right. The love I have for you doesn't get smaller, because I also care about David. And his love for me doesn't get smaller because he cares about you too. Elena reached over and squeezed her daughter's hand. I want you to be happy, Mom. Really happy, not just surviving happy. And I think David makes you really happy. He does, Elena admitted. But Maya, you'll always be my priority. Always. I know that. But Mom, you deserve to have love in your life too, and I think David deserves to know how we both feel about him. Elena looked at her daughter with amazement. When did you get so wise? I had a good teacher, Maya said with a smile. That night, after Maya went to bed, Elena lay awake thinking about everything her daughter had said. Maya was right. Elena had been holding back, being cautious, protecting herself from possible hurt. But what if, instead of protecting herself from pain, she was also protecting herself from joy? Elena had spent 2 years rebuilding her life. focusing on being a good mother and pursuing her career goals. She'd been so afraid of making another mistake that she'd forgotten how to take chances on good things. She thought about David, his kindness, his consistency, his genuine care for both her and Maya. She thought about how safe she felt with him, but also how alive he made her feel. By the time Sunday evening rolled around, Elena had made a decision. She was tired of being careful. She was tired of waiting to see what would happen. For once in her life, she was going to go after what she wanted. David was at home grading papers when his doorbell rang. It was almost 8 o'clock, and he wasn't expecting anyone. When he opened the door, Elena was standing there with snow in her hair and determination in her eyes. "Elena, what are you doing here? Is everything okay?" "Can I come in?" she asked. "I need to talk to you about something important." David stepped aside to let her in, immediately concerned. "Is it Maya? Did something happen?" "Maya's fine. She's at her friend Jenna's house studying. This is about us, David." Elena took off her coat and turned to face him. She looked nervous but resolved. "I've been thinking a lot lately about what I want from life," she began. "And I realize I've been approaching this whole thing backwards." David waited for her to continue, not sure where this was going. "I've been so careful, so worried about making the wrong choice, that I forgot something important. Sometimes the biggest mistake you can make is not making a choice at all." Elena stepped closer to him. "David, I don't want to date you." David felt his heart drop to his stomach. "Elena, Let me finish," she said, holding up her hand. "I don't want to date you because dating feels too small for what I feel for you. I don't want to take things slow and see where it goes. I know where I want it to go." David stared at her, hardly believing what he was hearing. "I want you to be my partner, David. Not just my boyfriend, not just someone I'm seeing. I want you to be the person I build a life with." David stood in his living room staring at Elena as if he couldn't quite believe what she'd just said. The snow was still melting in her hair, and her cheeks were red from the cold, but her eyes were bright with determination. "Elena, are you sure about this?" he asked quietly. "I mean, we've only been together for a few months. This is a big step." Elena smiled, and David could see both nervousness and certainty in her expression. "David, I've spent the last 2 years rebuilding my life from scratch. I've learned to trust my instincts about what's good for me and Maya, and every instinct I have is telling me that you're the best thing that's happened to us." She moved closer to him, reaching out to take his hands. "I know it might seem fast to other people, but I've been watching you for over a year now. I've seen how you treat Maya when you think no one's looking. I've seen your patience, your kindness, your consistency. I've seen who you are when things are difficult." David's heart was racing. "But what if I let you down? What if I'm not ready for this kind of responsibility?" "David, you've already been taking care of us in the ways that matter most," Elena said softly. "You helped heal my daughter when I didn't know how. You've shown up for us consistently, week after week. You've already proven who you are." David was quiet for a long moment, processing everything she'd said. He thought about the past year, about how his life had changed since Maya first walked into his office. He thought about the joy Elena brought to his days, the way Maya had become like a daughter to him, the way this little family had filled spaces in his heart he didn't even know were empty. "I love you," he said suddenly. "I love both of you. I love Maya's determination and your strength. I love our Sunday dinners and the way you both laugh at my terrible cooking jokes. I love that Maya trusts me enough to ask for help with her college applications." Elena's eyes filled with tears. "But I'm scared too," David admitted. "What if I mess this up? What if Maya decides she doesn't want me as a stepfather? What if—" Elena placed her finger gently over his lips. "What if it's wonderful? What if we build something beautiful together? What if Maya gets the father figure she's always wanted and I get the partner I never thought I'd find?" David looked into her eyes and saw his own hopes reflected back at him. "When you put it like that, David, Chen, will you take a leap of faith with me?" David pulled her into his arms and kissed her, pouring all of his love and hope and excitement into that one moment. "Yes," he whispered against her lips. Yes, I want to build a life with you. The next morning, David woke up with a mixture of excitement and nerves. He and Elena had talked until almost 2 in the morning, planning and dreaming about their future together. Now they had to tell Maya. Elena had suggested that they tell her together over breakfast. She deserves to hear this from both of us, she'd said. This decision affects her just as much as it affects us. When David arrived at Elena's apartment at 9 o'clock, Maya was already up and making pancakes. She looked back and forth between her mother and David with a knowing smile. "Okay, what's going on?" she asked, flipping a pancake with practiced ease. "You both look like you have news." Elena and David exchanged a look. They'd planned to ease into the conversation, but Maya had always been direct. "Actually, we do have some news," Elena said, sitting down at the kitchen table. "David and I have decided to get married." Maya dropped her spatula and spun around to face them. "Seriously, you guys are engaged?" "Well, we haven't made it official yet," David said, feeling suddenly shy. "But yes, we want to get married." Maya let out a whoop of joy and threw her arms around both of them. "This is the best news ever. I was wondering when you two were going to figure out what everyone else could already see." Elena laughed. "You're okay with this, sweetheart? Really? Okay? Mom, I've been hoping this would happen since the first time I saw you two together. You belong together, it's obvious." Maya pulled back and looked at David seriously. "But I have some conditions." David raised an eyebrow. "Conditions?" "First, I want to help plan the wedding. Nothing too fancy, but I want to be involved." "Deal," Elena said immediately. "Second, I want to keep seeing David professionally until I graduate high school. I know he won't be my counselor anymore once you're married, but I like our Thursday talks. They help me stay focused." David nodded. "Actually, I was thinking the same thing. We should probably arrange for you to see someone else at the center, just to avoid any conflicts of interest, but Maya, I'll always be here if you need to talk." "Good. And third," Maya said, grinning, "I want David to adopt me. Legally. I want his last name." David felt his throat close up with emotion. "Maya, are you sure that's a big step?" "I'm sure. I want us to be a real family. All the way." Elena was crying now, happy tears streaming down her face. "Oh, honey, if that's what you want, then that's what we'll do." 6 months later, David found himself standing in the small garden behind the community center, wearing his best suit and waiting for his bride to walk down the aisle. It was a perfect spring day, and about 30 of their closest friends and family members were gathered to witness their ceremony. Maya appeared first, wearing a beautiful blue dress and carrying a bouquet of white roses. She was Elena's maid of honor, and David had never seen her look so happy. Then Elena appeared, and David's breath caught in his throat. She was wearing a simple white dress that made her look radiant, and she was smiling the biggest smile he'd ever seen. As she walked toward him, David thought about the journey that had brought them to this moment. It had started with a troubled teenager who needed help, and it had led to a love story that none of them could have predicted. Elena reached him and took his hands, and David could see tears of joy in her eyes. "Ready to become a family?" she whispered. "I can't wait," he whispered back. The ceremony was simple but meaningful. They'd written their own vows, and when it came time for David to speak, he looked directly at both Elena and Maya. "Elena, you've taught me that love isn't just a feeling. It's a choice you make every day. You've chosen to trust me with your heart and with the most precious thing in your life. I promise to be worthy of that trust." He turned to Maya. "And Maya, you've taught me that family isn't just about blood. It's about showing up, consistently. With love and support, I promise to be the father figure you deserve today and always." There wasn't a dry eye in the audience. A year later, David was sitting in his new office at the community center. He'd been promoted to program director when Maya knocked on his door. "Hey, Dad," she said, still getting used to the word, but loving how it sounded. "Mom wanted me to give you this." She handed him an envelope with his name written on it in Elena's handwriting. Inside was a photo from their wedding day, the three of them laughing together right after the ceremony, and a note that simply said, "Thank you for taking a chance on us. Love, your family." David smiled and put the photo on his desk, right next to the one of Maya in her graduation cap and gown. She'd graduated valedictorian of her class and was headed to college in the fall with a full scholarship. As he looked at the photos, David thought about how much their lives had changed. Elena had finished nursing school and was now working at the children's hospital, doing exactly what she'd always dreamed of doing. Maya had grown into a confident, caring young woman who wanted to become a social worker herself someday. And David had learned that sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected places. He'd gone to work that Thursday evening thinking he was just doing his job. He'd ended up finding his family. The adoption had been finalized 3 months after the wedding. Maya Rodriguez had officially become Maya Chen, and David had officially become her father, not just in his heart, but in the eyes of the law. That evening, as David drove home to his wife and daughter, he reflected on Elena's words from that snowy night when she'd shown up at his door. She'd been right about taking chances, about not being afraid to go after what you want. Sometimes the biggest risk is not taking one at all. And sometimes, when you're brave enough to open your heart to unexpected love, you end up with everything you never knew you wanted. As he pulled into their driveway, David could see Elena and Maya through the kitchen window, cooking dinner together and laughing about something. His family, his home. He'd spent years helping other people rebuild their lives. He'd never expected someone to walk into his life and help him build one of his own. But that's exactly what had happened, and David couldn't imagine it any other way.